Hello, welcome to your academy. At your academy today in this lecture, we will deal with Church Going by Philip Larkin. We have already dealt with Philip Larkin, our introduction to Philip Larkin. You can check out the link that pops up at the top of this video and watch Introduction to Philip Larkin, our literary life of Philip Larkin, in case you do not know about Philip Larkin. In this lecture, we will deal with one of the most famous poems of Philip Larkin, that is Church Going. But before we take up the text of the poem Philip Larkin, let's have a look at the background of this poem called Church Going. You'll see when it was published, in which collection was it published, under what circumstances was this poem written, and how have those circumstances influence the composition of this poem, or how does those circumstances influence the theme and concerns of the poem Church Going. So starting with the publication of this poem Church Going, it was published in the first successful collection of poetry by Philip Larkin titled as The Less Deceived, which was published in 1955. If you have watched the lecture on Introduction to Philip Larkin, our literary life of Philip Larkin, you must know that The Less Deceived was the first successful publication of Philip Larkin. And in this successful collection of poetry, The Less Deceived, the most successful poem was Church Going. And Church Going was considered as the best or representative poem of the movement. The movement is that literary movement with which we normally associate Philip Larkin with, though Philip Larkin himself never claimed to be part of the movement or never said that he was a movement poet or he shared similarities with other movement poets. But then in literary history we say that Philip Larkin was a movement poet, and for that matter one of the most influential of the movement poets of his time. Now the other aspects that we will look at the Church Going is the time when it was published. Now if it is 1955, then it's obviously post World War II era. Now if it is the decade of 1950s, this is the decade when postmodernism had started or beginning to hold its ground in England, both politically and literally. And these people, these poets, including Kingsley Amis and Philip Larkin, were anti-modernists. Now, since they were anti-modernists, so we would also see that postmodernism has started coming in, and the ideals of modernism are being ignored to a great extent. There are few important characteristics of post-World War era, and one of those is skepticism. Skepticism has, taken hold of the thinkers, of the philosophers, of the writers, and they are very skeptic, not only about life. They are skeptic about religion, they are skeptic about tradition, they are skeptic about customs, they are skeptic about other things. The other would be the death of religion, almost the death of God. Religion holds no strong ground in England in post World War II era. Now, keeping this background in mind, this context is in mind, these circumstances in mind, it is these circumstances which will shape up the content of the poem Church Going. The poem would be very skeptic in nature, particularly when it comes to the religion. It would be skeptic towards the rituals, towards the traditions, towards the customs, and God would be absolutely absent kind of a thing in this poem. Regarding the title of this poem Church Going, the title of this poem is ironical in nature, as is, irony is one of the trait of the postmodern writings. And church going, if you convert this short title into a sentence, it would be like going to the church. And going to the church would reflect or express a lot of devotion and piety. But there is no such thing in the title Church Going or in the content of the poem Church Going. It's not about the church going, a person who goes to the church on Sunday full of devotion, fulfills the rituals and is, excited to go to the church. But no such thing happens here. Rather, it's about indifferences of church going or to the church going. the speaker of the poem would visit church not because he has any kind of devotion towards religion or towards God. No, he doesn't have. Rather, he is very indifferent to these things. And when he is dealing with church, he is not dealing with religion. Rather, he is dealing with a physical building which has hosted religion for quite some time. And now Philip Larkin sees that religion seems to be dying in England. So this poem would be about the death of religion, about the destruction of religion, about the end of religion. Now, these would be some of the perspectives or aspects which you will keep in mind when we will read this poem. And the indifference of the poet, which is towards the subject of church going, will also be there in the tune of the poet when he discusses this subject matter. Now, we'll first take up the text of the poem Church Going, and after reading the text, we will make the detailed analysis of this poem or verse by verse analysis of this poem. So first up, let's take the text of the poem Church Going. Once I'm sure there is nothing going on, I step inside, letting the door thud shut. Another church, matting, seats and stone, and little books, sprawling of flowers cut for Sunday. Brownish now, some brass and stuff up at the holy end, the small neat organ, and a tense, musty, unignorable silence, breathed God knows how long. Hatless I take off, my cycle clips in awkward reverence, move forward, run my hand around the fount from where I stand. The roof looks almost new, cleaned or restored. Someone would know I don't. Mounting the lectern, I pursue a few hectoring large-scale verses and pronounce, here endeth much more loudly than I would mend. The echoes snigger briefly. Back at the door, I sign the book, donate an Irish sixpence, reflect the place was not worth stopping for. Yet stop I did. In fact, I often do, and always end much at a loss like this, wondering what to look for. Wondering too, when churches fall completely out of use, what we shall turn them into, if we shall keep a few cathedrals chronically on show, their parchment plate and pikes in locked cases, and let the rest rent free to the wren and sheep. Shall we avoid them as unlucky places? Or after dark will dubious women come to make their children touch a particular stone, pick simples for a cancer, or on some advised night see walking a dead one? Power of some sort or other will go on. In games and riddles, seemingly at random, but superstition like belief must die. And what remains when disbelief is gone, has gone? Grass, weedy pavement, brambles, buttress, sky. A shape less recognizable each week, a purpose more obscure. I wonder who will be the last, the very last to seek this place for what it was. One of the crew that tap and jot and know what road lofts were, some ruined bibber, randy for an antique, or Christmas addict counting on a whiff of gown and bands and organ pipes and myrrh? Or will he be my representative, bold, uninformed, knowing the ghostly sill dispersed, yet tending to this cross of grown through suburb scrub because it held up unsplit, so long and equally? What sense is found? Only in separation, marriage and birth and deaths and thoughts of these. For whom was built this special shell? For though I have no idea what this accoutred frosty barn is worth, it pleases me to stand in silence here. A serious house on serious earth. It is. in whose blent air all our compulsions meet, are recognized and robbed as destinies, and that much never can be obsolete. Since someone will forever be surprising, a hunger in himself to be more serious, and gravitating with it to this ground, which he once heard was proper to grow wise in. If only that, so many dead lie around. That was the text of the poem Church Going. This is fairly a long poem, 7 stanzas poem, and each stanza has a good number of verses. So this lecture is going to be long. So what we would do, we would divide this lecture into parts as we do with most of the lectures at your academy, so that it becomes convenient for the people to watch. And then if you find difficulty, in finding all the parts of a particular lecture, you can refer to the end screens. We add end screens to each video, so you can click on the end screen that pops up at the end of one video, and that would direct you to immediate next part. Otherwise, you can also visit the playlist section, which would be the most convenient aspect thing for you, because if you play a video in the playlist, it would automatically lead you to the next part of the video. So in the next section, we'll deal with the detailed analysis of this poem.